And we are back live. Welcome to the Boxing Squared YouTube channel, weekly live stream, 9:30 p.m. New Zealand time. Welcome one and all. If you're listening on the archive, thank you for joining us. There's going to be a number of topics that I wanted to cover off this week. I guess a few of them, the ones that I'll start off with, relate to some of this sort of bizarre situation with the failed VADA test for Tyrone Spong, a conspiracy claimed, and then obviously you have Chaz Witherspoon, an unexpected replacement coming in, and the sort of peripheral issue of Joey Daweko, of him signing a contract, but then ultimately them going with Chaz Witherspoon. It's sort of, this situation's overshadowed what is Alexander Usyk's first fight at heavyweight. But yeah, so I'll get through those sort of topics, and I wanted to cover a few other bits and pieces. What are we expecting of Alexander Usyk in his first fight at heavyweight, even if it is against Chaz Witherspoon? Do you expect him to break down Witherspoon? Do you expect him to maybe struggle? Because, after all, he's had a year out of the ring. A couple of other topics we'll get to. David Price stepping in to face Derek Chisora. It seems to have landed okay with fans. Maybe it's not the best fight that could have been made, but in the context of a relatively short notice opponent, it's not terrible, and it is a sort of domestic dust-up. There's always a bit of interest for that sort of thing. Tyson Fury making a foray into the WWE. What did you make of this? Do you think it was a smart idea, or do you think it was a bit of folly on Fury's part? FA Jagba, he's got a fight coming up, and Aslanbek Makhmadov, he'll be back by the end of the year. Two of my favourite prospects coming through. Good to see that they do have fights scheduled. And we know that Daniel Dubois is likely to have a fight coming up by the end of the year, but we'll get to all that and more, including some Patreon questions from patrons. We've got a number this week, so we'll get to that as well. So I'll just check here in the chat. Yes, we do have some. It sort of is a little bit of a delay in the comments starting to filter through, but hello to Adam Fahey, Unga, IEB, Thai Boxer, hello. Scott70 is in the building. Arjun is in the building. Arjun says, hey man, credit to you for putting out these heavyweight videos. Well, thank you for watching. I mean, the channel doesn't go anywhere or do anything if people aren't watching, so I do appreciate all the support, and I know that some of the videos that I do might be a bit more sort of detailed, and sort of some of the more fringe people within the heavyweight division, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I like to have a mix of variety, not just the sort of top couple of names, because that would just bore my pants off. I mean, you'll probably know some channels that so-called boxing channels, but it sort of feels like it's about the same three fighters that they cover over and over. To me, that's just not my bag. I'd rather just have a whole mix of topics, and sometimes I don't go after the big headlines all the time, just because there's other things that catch my eye and I think, yeah, I want to do a video on that because I'm interested in that. Everyone runs their YouTube channel differently, so I'm not trying to slate other channels. I'm just trying to explain some of the point of difference with my own. I'm kind of sort of digging a hole there for myself. Anyway, I'll get back to the chat. There's comments flying in. We've already got 14 people in the chat. Thank you for joining the Boxing Squared live stream, weekly live stream on a Friday. Where did I get to? So Thai Boxer says hello from Scotland, all the way from Scotland. Arjun's, okay, we've covered that one. IB Freely says, can we start with Errol Spence, please? Yeah, I'm not too sure what I can sort of add to that situation, except, it really is a terrible situation. I hope that he does come through it. Have been some conflicting reports about, the degree of the injury sustained. PBC have sort of sought to clarify that, put out a press release basically sort of saying, beyond a few different bits and pieces, no broken bones, and he should recover. Whether this will impact his boxing career in terms of the long term, it's just too early to tell, but I hope he does get well. Obviously, he's one of the best fighters in the world right now, and he's a unified champion at his weight, 147, so I hope him a speedy and swift recovery. So Rob Plant says, what's going on, dude? Never managed to catch you live before. Well, it's only sort of the last month, about this time every week, that I've been sort of starting to do a regular live stream, just trying to mix it up a little bit. So hope you're enjoying what you're hearing so far. We'll look to go for maybe about I always say about 30 to 45 minutes, but it ends up blowing out to over an hour. So we'll just see how we go. IB Freely says, wishing him a speedy recovery. Yes, I think most people echo your sentiments, and I think for these sorts of situations where a boxer, a high-profile athlete, it doesn't even have to be that, but these sort of situations, people put aside, the different things that they want to happen within boxing, say with, Spence and the Crawford stuff, that sort of just falls to the side. People want to see these guys, healthy and able to be in big fights. So I think most people are wishing Spence, or they should be, a speedy recovery. Solo Raider Temp says, kia ora, Mr. Squared, and kia ora to you too. Litoi says Fury is doing the right thing for him, bringing in more boxing fans. I will get to that, because my personal opinion is it's a stroke of genius. I mean, obviously some of what they've been doing, some of the old school top rank type stuff, and the hype and bluster has not been filling the seats and not getting the interest that they've wanted. So they've sort of branched out here, trying to pick up a different piece of audience, and it's good exposure for Fury. But we'll come to that. We've got, I can't even pronounce that, so Osa Rima Wian, I'm sorry if I butchered that, but hello to you too. Gareth Hancock says, yo Squared, how's it? I'm good. It's Friday night here. I've been a little bit under the weather this week, but hopefully I'm starting to come out of it. Where are we? The comments really are coming in thick and fast. It's hard to keep up. So Thai Boxer says, you're doing a great job, mate. Thank you for supporting the channel and being here. MDJ says, hello Squared, hello to you too. Arjun says, dude, the fact that you cover all the heavyweights is awesome. You and Mr. Boxing Today. Yeah, he's got a great channel. It's a shame that he hasn't been as active as he has been in the past, but he did put out a really good video today, so if you can catch it, do go over, not obviously after this, not during, but yeah, Mr. Boxing Today, great channel, and recommend you subscribe if you haven't already done so. Arjun says, always been on the top of the game with the heavyweights. You're really laying on the flattery down here thick, Arjun. Thank you. We've got Salty Sally saying, g'day from Wanganui. I actually lived in Wanganui at one point. It's it's got a bit of a bad rap, but it's not too bad. Solo says, yeah, Salty, Wonga's hard. Depending where you are from New Zealand, there's different places where, like, I grew up in Palmerston North, for example, and Ashurst, which is a little town nearby, would be called Ash Vegas, but people from Wanganui would call it Wonga Vegas, and other parts of New Zealand add Vegas. I don't know, it's a New Zealand thing, but yeah. Anyway, moving on. UK papers conflicting the reports as usual, saying he's in intensive care, but I wouldn't comment until the full story is out. Yeah, I saw something else today from, I think it was TMZ, but hard to trust them sometimes about what is going on with the condition of Errol Spence, but I think everyone is hoping that he does recover, and that there is no long-term damage, not just because of the boxing career stuff, but just, it's never good to see someone, injured badly and then having some sort of life-altering injury. So we've got Blue Collar Sports TV in the building. That's Del Boys. He says, what's up, Boxing Squared, listening from work. Well, I hope it's helping you pass a little bit of your morning a bit quicker than it otherwise would have gone. And if you haven't subscribed to Del Boy, aka Blue Collar Sports TV, please do so. He's got a great channel, covers and previews a lot of fights, a lot of really good fights. They don't necessarily always get the attention that they should. He did a very good preview on Ricky Burns and Lee Selby, which I was watching earlier today. So Big Rob, he's joined the building. He says, yo, Boxing Squared, hello to you too. Blue Collar Sports TV, fingers crossed for Errol Spence. Yeah, I think everyone is feeling like that at the moment. So I've got 30 people in the building. Only 8 people have clicked like. Yeah, so if you can smash that like button, hit the thumbs up, that would be much appreciated. I'll get to one of the first topics that I had on my list. Where are we now? So this whole Tyrone Spong situation. I know that there is, it seems to be something with boxing. People love a good conspiracy, love to just think the worst in terms of, because Spong's came after the failed test, has come out and basically said he's been set up and that there's been a manipulative attempt to remove him from this fight. But my sort of question is, come on, for what purpose? he was the opponent who was brought in. This wasn't a mandatory sort of challenge. He wasn't ordered to face Alexander Usyk. He was the hand-picked opponent. They specifically chose this guy, brought him in. I mean, I'm not buying the whole sort of, oh, they saw Tyrone Spong and then, got jittery nerves and, got cold feet and decided to pull out. I mean, to me, that just seems laughable. I mean, if there's something in a test, there's something in a test. And now it's up to the burden of proof is on Tyrone Spong to try clear his name. I mean, trying to turn it around and make out that it's someone else has done something that's impacted you and that you're out of the fight because someone else, but it's your failed test. To me, it just seems completely laughable. So, I mean, maybe there's been an issue with this test in terms of maybe he'll pass the B sample. Maybe, I don't know. Tyrone Spong, it's up to him to clear his name. He wasn't such a big name or a big threat that, this would even have any credence that it's been some sort of massive conspiracy and cover-up to get him out of the fight. I just can't buy that. But the replacement, obviously there was a little bit of drama there too. So it wasn't just the test. Obviously we had Joey Dueco coming out the next day. And that was a name that fans were sort of saying, well, that could be a good step-in opponent. And clearly that was one of the names that Eddie Hearn thought, yeah, I'll give him a call. But he signed a contract, but it was never signed at the other end because they gave Chaz Witherspoon the fight. And I think when I heard Chaz Witherspoon, I was thinking, man, this is a bit of a blast from the past because it's, occasionally guys, step into fights and you're like, are they even still fighting? Some of these guys who've maybe once, because Witherspoon was an up-and-comer about 10 years ago. He was in a couple of decent sort of fights, but, I guess it's the same with Chris Arreola because this guy fought, Witherspoon fought Arreola back in the day. But it's some of these guys really, this is not a good fight. I'm not really happy with it, but I guess it is what it is. I said in my initial video, we've got to keep our expectations in check about the opponent, but when you hear the name and you're like, geez, where have they dug this guy up from? And you go, okay, well, he's only had like half a dozen fights against, mostly nobody opponents in the past sort of 6-7 years. Doesn't inspire sort of confidence. And if I had have had a ticket to that show and I bought it to see Usyk face not necessarily Spong but a half decent opponent, at least you could sort of claim, well, Tyrone Spong was a ranked opponent with the WBO, for example. He was unbeaten. Where Witherspoon, he's pretty long in the tooth now. And I know some people are trying to talk up Chaz Witherspoon and his boxing and that sort of stuff, but he was okay back in the day, but nothing's going to have made him any better. And he might try to box a bit, and even though he says he's coming to rumble, I think he will try to be defensively responsible. He's going to try to use his length. He's a slightly taller guy according to the stats, but from what I saw, I thought they looked about the same height. But yeah, I think Alexander Usyk should be able to get through this fight comfortably enough. And it is one of these sort of fights where could go one of two ways, because we have to factor in the context of he's been out of the ring for a year. This guy could be a bit rusty. It might take him a few rounds just to sort of blow the cobwebs off. And if he looks a little bit shaky to any extent in terms of rust, that sort of thing, there'll be certain boxing fans who'll just be piling in saying that he'll do nothing in the heavyweight division, which would be massively short-sighted in my opinion. But, then again, we might, sort of like Tyson Fury's fight against Tom Schwartz, where I think most people were sort of, not expecting much, but obviously he went in there, looked very slick, and just dominated Schwartz and got him out of there in a couple of rounds. So it could be that sort of performance from Usyk where he just goes in and puts on a masterclass. But, yeah, I'm sort of expecting he's going to, because of the timeout, he'll look to work his way into the fight, but I fully expect him to win this fight with ease overall. Might have a couple of moments where you go, yeah, there's a little bit of rust there, but I think he will get through this. So I'll just get back to the chat here, because the comments they just pile up so fast. Where are we? So Litoy says, where are you based, Boxing Squared? Love from Christchurch. I live in the Wellington area. Big Rob says, I didn't think it was possible for Usyk to look any more terrifying than he did until he moved up to heavyweight. Guy looks like a beast. Well, it remains to be seen what he can do at the weight, but I have confidence that he's going to slot in here and look pretty good. He's going to have some advantages over some guys in the division. because there's a lot of just slow lumbering guys at heavyweight that have got a big punch and not too much else. And then there's other, mostly the sort of more elite guys who sort of separate themselves with their movement, with their skills, or in some cases just with power. But I do think that Alexander Usyk and this whole narrative that he's too small is, really overblown. I think he's going to be quite successful at the weight. I mean, he's a legitimate 6'3" from what I sort of saw against Chaz Witherspoon, who was listed apparently as 6'4", but they looked about the same height. I mean, there's plenty of guys, and I mentioned this in my video earlier today, who just lie about their height. They say they're 6'4", but they're really 6'3" or 6'3.5", and they just crib, a little bit of extra height. There's plenty of guys rolling around. And what Usyk, gives away in terms of not necessarily height, because I think, maybe more than half of the heavyweight division is his height or even smaller. Maybe it's even more than that. 6'3" is not a terribly small heavyweight, but what he's giving up in terms of his bulk, in terms of his frame, you just look at his skills, his movement, his speed. I mean, that is going to give all sorts of opponents fits. Moving on, Jeremy says, over here they say Spencer's doing okay, he's talking to his parents and such. Let's hope so. So liberalism is a cult, says I hit like, and if you can smash that like button, please do so. We've got 38 viewers in the chat right now. Thank you one and all for joining the weekly Boxing Squared live stream. Greg says, hi from Auckland, any updates on Joseph Peter Parker? Yeah, it's quite interesting, this whole sort of thing. It was quickly sort of forgotten, with the spider bite, the illness. Hopefully they can get him out by the end of the year on a card somewhere. If it's on the Joshua undercard, or I believe Eddie Hearn's got a show in America in December as well. He needs to get back out and have a run, because I was talking to, I think it was Adam Fahey, who's one of the moderators in the chat here, just the other day, that the whole 2019, if you look at it, it's been a bit of a write-off for Joseph Parker. He had that fight against Alex Leopai, and that was a short notice opponent. It was meant to be Eric Molina, and it's sort of, he did okay in that fight, but it didn't exactly sort of knock my socks off or anything. And if that's it for 2019, that's a pretty lean year. And then when you consider in 2018, he had 2 losses and a tune-up win over Alexander Flores in December, it starts to look like a couple of lean years for Joseph Parker overall, that he doesn't necessarily have a lot of form to fall back on, and not a lot of wins either, especially if he's not really fighting much as well. So I do hope that they get him onto a decent card, and I do hope that they can actually give him a decent fight, because he's in need of one. This Chisora one was going to be a good opportunity to him to re-announce himself to the heavyweight division, and obviously spider bites or whatever it is, what happened, he's been ill, he hasn't been able to train. And I did see a number of comments saying, oh well, he had 4 weeks to the fight, 1 week sick, that's okay. But they have these training camps down to an art. It's a real science to the time and what they're doing week by week, and milestones and other bits and pieces, and you throw a week out there through sickness, it's just going to torpedo the whole thing. Screaming Eagle says, today is Worldwide Mental Health Day, and it's a great infinitive. There should be a mental health day for us heavyweight fans. Maybe a mental health week or something for heavyweight fans. This year has really been trash, hasn't it? Overall, for heavyweight fans, hasn't really been a lot on the plate. It's mostly sort of stuff that you think's coming down the pipe, doesn't happen, and you get a whole bunch of tune-ups. I think earlier in the year I was calling it the year of the tune-up. We've really haven't had too much to look forward to. There's only been maybe a handful of competitive fights, really competitive fights, and not much else. So it's been a little bit of a lean year. Definitely way less busy than 2018 was. So Arjun says Usyk will get Hulk smashed by Wilder, Fury and Joshua, and I think Joshua is a robot, but Usyk is not going to be great against these top guys. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Usyk can combat the truly tall guys, the guys 6'6" and above, because I think anyone who's a sort of 6'5" and under, and doesn't necessarily have like a massive 90-inch reach, for example, I think Alexander Usyk and what he can do, he can do it well. But coming to the guys, I think Wilder's got an 83-inch reach. Obviously, he's 6'7". Joshua's 6'6", 82-inch reach. Tyson Fury, 85-inch reach. And he's 6'9", allegedly. I did see there was a face-off between him and Braun Strowman, And because you might have noticed, Tyson Fury wears this hat, but inside the hat, the way that he wears it, it actually gives him about an inch of height. You can see clear photos where it shows a gap between his head and the top of the hat. And when he was had that with Braun Strowman, because Strowman is 6'8", I was thinking they look exactly the same size. And I think when Wilder fought Fury, and Wilder's 6'7", they looked pretty much the same size. So the whole 6'9", I think maybe Tyson Fury is exaggerating maybe by an inch and a half. I don't know. What do you make of that? I've always thought he's not quite 6'9", but he's very tall nonetheless. Ruiz will smash him. Who smashed Alexander Usyk. Be an interesting fight. I think the movement from Usyk would give Ruiz trouble, but I also think that Ruiz with his fast hands might be able to catch up in spots to Alexander Usyk. Spong going through big baby withdrawals. I bet he is, but probably not as bad because he wasn't several $1 million on the line for him. I've seen a bit of Spong, and genuinely he's not much better than Witherspoon. They may even be the same level. What's sort of hard to say, I mean, back in his kickboxing days, Spong, obviously a very storied career, but, in the squared circle, we haven't really seen much from Spong at all. He's, 14-0, and basically there's not much on the resume. And he did go, life and death with Yotalo Pereira at the end of last year, although he had a hand injury. He suffered that early in the fight, but, he really should have done maybe a bit better against him. And this is the guy that Martin Piccoli knocked out in, two rounds. Arjun says Ruiz winning the AJ rematch. Well, it's going to be a good rematch. I still think that's a 50-50 fight. It depends how they fight, the styles, and I'll go into that in due course. I did start my sort of 10 things to watch for video, but I've been a little bit crook this week, and obviously the day-to-day videos, just rolling them over. It's sort of sometimes just not enough hours in the day to get things done on top of work. Usyk beats AJ, says Big Rob 123. It's hard to say. I think Usyk is going to have some success in the heavyweight division, depending on how he's matched. He could well win a belt, but some of the names towards the top end are going to be competitive fights, that's for sure. So Fat Apple says Parker versus Miller could be a possible future fight. I don't know. I mean, Jarrell Miller's going to do what Jarrell Miller does. I think he's going to have a tune-up, maybe 2 tune-ups. He's going to try and get back into the good books of one of the promoters and then line himself up with a big fight. He's going to sort of trade on his name and use his mouth, work it into overdrive to get his way back into some sort of, 7-figure fight. Did you see Dillian Whyte in the WBC's tweets implying he'll be mandatory again and fighting Wilder next year? Well, yeah, I mean, while I did see White's tweet in terms of he's coming back and the other bits and pieces that he said fighting soon. Yeah, I mean, I would expect if he can clear whatever's happening with this UCAD stuff, if the WBC is happy with the information they've provided, because remember, they said that, look, we're putting the WBC mandatory status and the interim world title status on hold. We need more information after that whole Revis, after that fight situation with the UCAD test. And maybe that information has been supplied now. Maybe the WBC is thawing on this. Maybe UCAD's about to be lined up, and maybe they will sort of come through in the next couple of weeks, and all of a sudden they're going to announce White's next fight. But I think Dillian Whyte will continue, doing what Dillian Whyte can in terms of, his career. He wants to get out before the end of the year. I think, will that be on pay-per-view? That's the question. I mean, they're going to have to take a bit of a barometer of, what's the sort of appetite for Dillian Whyte, because I think some of what's gone on has affected his brand and his popularity, and there's too many unanswered questions at the moment. And even if the information is all laid bare, maybe not everyone's going to sort of, lap it all up. There could be some people who'll be like, yeah, I'm still a little bit undecided about this. So Unga says Areola and Witherspoon were both 23-0 when they fought a long time ago. I think it was back in 2008 or something like that. Screaming Eagle says Diana Bell White versus Spider Bite Parker. That's what I want. I mean, maybe that rematch will happen, but I've been saying ever since that first fight happened, White won't fight Parker again until he takes a loss. He will, I think, Eddie Hearn, if Parker is still in that stable at the point that White's taken a loss, they'll look to recycle that into the rematch that Joseph Parker has desperately been calling for. And for obvious reasons, it will probably be at that point the biggest money available for White. In one interview, Hearn said that Usyk's going to wait for the winner of Joshua Ruiz 2 and not going to fight in between. Yeah, I don't think he will. I think he'll have this one fight now, and this will be his preparation for his world title shot. And you may have also noticed Eddie Hearn, and a lot of other people have said this as well in recent months, that the belts are going to fracture pretty quickly, because there is Kubrat Pulev waiting in the wings. The IBF has ordered that he's got to have his title shot before the end of May 2020. And depending on who you believe in terms of who's next up in the order, which has always been said it was the WBO, but if the IBF has put this up that Pulev needs to get a shot, I mean, the winner of Joshua Ruiz 2 might have to drop a belt, and then all of a sudden that could set up, Usyk to fight either the winner of that Ruiz-Joshua fight or the next highest contender if that belt is the one that's dropped. And you'd have to imagine, if Ruiz wins the rematch, that it's an easy choice for the PBC to drop the WBO belt, considering this whole, war that they have, this silent war with the WBO that they have, not acknowledging them. So Rev James, just lost my place there. Where were we? These comments are just really coming in thick and fast, so apologies. Okay, I found my place again. What's happened to Gassiev? Well, he's been injured. So he, the same injury, and I believe it was an arm injury, he sustained it again, and that's why he didn't fight Dweko the second time. And that second time was never officially announced, but Joey Dweko had already come out and sort of said that he was, going to be fighting him, sign the contract, yada yada yada. So Dweko is feeling a little bit of grief right now. He's signing contracts all over the place and getting no fights, and going into training camps, wasting his own money. So I can see why he is very peeved off at the moment. I'll quickly go to my next topic before getting back to the chat. I'm horrifically falling behind, but we'll catch up. We will catch up. So David Price stepping in to face Derek Chisora. I noted that Eddie Hearn said in an interview that they'd sold about 12,000 tickets for that card, which is headlined by Josh Taylor and Regis Prograis. And the day after that, David Price was announced as the opponent, the step-in late replacement opponent for Derek Chisora, that they sold another 1,000 tickets. So I guess that's sort of reflective of the mood that people do like this fight, that they do want to, support David Price against Derek Chisora. And generally, I think most people are, at a few weeks' notice, generally okay with it. Maybe it's not the greatest fight in the world, but in terms of trying to help the card, it's probably as good as they were going to do at this sort of short notice, and probably for the money available. The names that Eddie Hearn had thrown out, some of those maybe wouldn't have the sort of marquee value that a David Price has, just being a name. He's a face in the United Kingdom. He's been around for a long time and coming off a good win. So this is probably one of the better times to put David Price into a fight like this. I mean, if he had lost to Dave Allen, there's no way that you would have ever put him up for this fight with Derek Chisora. It wouldn't have helped the card, but I think there is a bit of a glow with David Price at the moment. There is fans sort of, and it's a dangerous thing, getting, starting to believe, well, maybe David Price has turned a corner. And I think a lot of people want to see him do well. They want to see him, get some wins, get some paydays, and, realise some of the potential that he was believed to have had earlier in his career, which has never quite been realised. So I don't mind the fight necessarily. It's sort of, for me, what can David Price do? Is if he's truly cleared the sort of mental blocks, the frailties that he's got, maybe he can work the jab, keep Chisora off him, land something of note. I mean, maybe he can sort of do what Tyson Fury did to Derek Chisora in the Fury-Chisora rematch. To me, though, that seems maybe, perhaps a little bit wishful thinking. I think David Price, I think he will, look good for a few rounds, but Derek Chisora is not Dave Allen. And also, Derek Chisora will bring the pressure. He's got a few more tricks in his tool bag, and I think the pressure will start to weigh on David Price. and maybe it could be a mid to late round stoppage for Chisora. I don't know. I mean, if David Price can win this, he really is going to be into a big fight next. I don't expect it, but I would say that Chisora deserves to be a sort of 70-30 favourite, something like that. I don't know. Am I being harsh, or is that just me being more of a realist about, one fight against Dave Allen, a limited box to be fair, isn't going to all of a sudden have it change David Price outright. I'm sure he's derived some confidence from it, but is it enough? Has he really turned the corner? Can he really, keep Chisora off him for 12 rounds? Yeah, I'm not so sure. What do you make of it? Drop some comments in the chat there, and I'll get to it in about 15 minutes once I catch up on the chat. So getting back to the chat here. Fat Apple says, if Ruiz beats AJ, I'm guessing he makes no money, and that one of the organisations will force an immediate mando or strip him from a unification with Wilder. I think the PBC, if Ruiz can win, on December 7th and win it outright, I think Deontay Wilder would deeply love that chance to face Ruiz. I think he would see less threat in Andy Ruiz Jr. than he would Anthony Joshua. And I think he would rate his chances of getting that unification too, being in-house, and if he gets the Fury fight under his belt, I mean, it'd be interesting to see, could he get out from the Fury fight if things went the PBC way, and then all of a sudden it's going to be a Wilder unification with Ruiz Jr. I don't know. I mean, there's been... Certainly Wilder was talking about that a little while ago, that he thought that Tyson Fury would want to step aside, but it sort of changes from week to week what Fury and Wilder say. You can never really sort of pin them down on anything because it keeps changing, like shifting sands. Unger says Gassiev continually getting injured now. I think he's gone. Solo Raid Attempt says Usyk Witherspoon doesn't go past 3 rounds. Well, I know Unger has been saying in the chat or the comment section of my latest video that he thinks that Usyk will maybe feel some of the pressure to come out, perform, and put Witherspoon away early, and that would make a statement to some extent. I'm not so sure he'll be so gung-ho. I think maybe he'll just work his way into the fight and do what he does. I think he will be cognizant that he has to look a certain way, and that, sort of his profile and the way people perceive him, especially after a year out where he's lost a little bit of momentum, a good performance is needed. Right Hook Boxing in the chat, you probably joined about 10 minutes ago or so, but I'm just slowly catching up here. 53 in the chat here. Thank you for joining me Friday night my time, wherever you are in the world. I hope you're doing well. Right Hook Boxing, Adam Fahey says that fight has fallen through twice, and I think Joey has moved on from that fight. Yeah, I'm not sure he would sign unless it was an ironclad that fight was going to go ahead, and even then, no guarantees. I think he'd be a little bit reticent. Bad Guy London says, Ayo, hello to you, BG London. Jason says, pray for Errol Spence. Yeah, it really is sort of... tough for him what's happened, obviously, after a good performance against Sean Porter, unifying, and then just a week or two later in a very bad accident. I saw that. I mean, I haven't seen the slowed down versions of it, which I know are floating around, but yeah, that car looked trashed. That was not a good accident, and from the reports that are coming out, it sounds like he's actually not too bad not too bad away, which is really good to hear, actually. So the Kissum says, hi Boxing Squared from Bangkok, and hello to you too. IEB says, how anticlimactic will be when Fury hurts himself doing some BS stunt in the WWE? Well, it's pretty scripted, and I don't think they're going to put Fury in harm's way to any real extent. I mean, if I thought some of what's happened so far, it was quite comical, but it didn't look like he was in any real danger. So Blue Collar Sports TV says, smash that like button. We've got Boxing Spectrum. Thank you for the super chat there. So Boxing Spectrum says, some people tell me Andy Ruiz Jr. has slow feet. I don't see that. Can you give me your opinion on that, Boxing Squared? I think it's, his foot speed's okay, but compared to his hand speed, I mean, that's sometimes the problem. His hands are so fast, his feet just can't keep up, but I don't necessarily think he's too slow-footed, but he doesn't have the fastest feet in the division, but his footwork's not bad. I don't mind. I think his footwork's pretty decent, but his hands, that's one of his real weapons, that speed. And Joshua, with the blurring speed of some of those punches that were coming in from Ruiz Jr. in the first fight, that did catch Joshua off guard, especially when he thought Ruiz Jr. was hurt. We know how that sort of, started the rot with that first knockdown. Taylor vs. Prograis, how you see it? Yeah, that's a really tough fight. I mean, I've been watching quite a bit of coverage around the place, previews and that sort of stuff, and I know that there is quite a few American channels and American fans of Prograis who think that he's just going to walk through Josh Taylor. For me, I think this is a very competitive fight. Yeah, it's 50-50. I mean, I think this really is a great final. If one guy does go in there and really schools the other, I'd be highly surprised. If I was to pick who I think will come through this, I would maybe slightly edge it to Prograis, but I'm happy to be wrong on it. They're both great fighters. So Screaming Eagle says, if it sounds like bullshit, I love Parker, but the whitetail spider bite story is poor. I don't think anyone's claimed it was a white-tail spider. It was a spider. He was bitten, apparently, in Las Vegas. Well, they suspect he was bitten. The symptoms he was displaying, obviously, from what the doctors or whoever's been informing them, they think it was a spider. But, I mean, presumably that would mean there's a bite somewhere, so, he would have to go looking for it, you'd think. So Fat Apple says, surprised Ruiz can see his feet with that overhang. Oh, that's ruthless. Big Rob 12C, Google it if you don't believe me. Not sure what that's about. Johnson Matthews says, boxing channel, you're an exceptional good commentator. Keep up the good work, fella. Cracking job. Thank you very much. He was 6'2" at the very least. Who, Ruiz Jr. Johnson Matthews says, boxing squared, glove, glove, glove. Blue Collar Sports TV, what's up, Boxing Spectrum? Boxing Spectrum. Were you on the channel the other night leaving drunken comments? There was someone who came to the channel and left half a dozen drunken comments. It was clearly, obviously, drunken comments. I can't remember who it was. Maybe it wasn't you. I'm sorry if it wasn't. Old Gonzo 22, slow metabolism and slow feet. Oh, what, for Ruiz Jr.? So Lee Toy says, you guys saying Usyk's too small, have no idea. He's been beaten heavyweights before. The likes of Farr and Joyce. Usyk will be the heavyweight division's boogeyman. Well, we're soon going to see. I mean, we'll get a little taste of it against Chaz Witherspoon. Whether we'll be left wanting after that performance, we'll have to see. He could go in there and look $1 million, or he could go in there and look a little rusty after a year out. But I still think, regardless of whatever performance he puts up against Witherspoon, he is going to be trouble and a stylistic nightmare for some guys in the heavyweight division. John Otter, David Hay was never 6'2". Look at him next to Klitschko, and Harrison was 6'1" at a push. Yeah, I mean, that's the crazy. Why are they so quick to lie about some of these things? Because, and that's the thing, it's not everyone who's doing it either with the height thing. Some guys will accurately list their height, and then you see them against the guy that's, I mean, say for example, Joseph Parker and Dillian Whyte, they're both meant to be 6'4". I don't believe that. I mean, when they actually had their face-offs, Joseph Parker was taller. I'm pretty sure Joseph Parker is 6'3". And Dillian Whyte's maybe 6'2.5" or something like that. But yeah, there's so many guys that you go, what's the point? Why have they added 2 inches to their height here? Psychological? I don't know. It's just sort of a hangover from the old days, but I'm not sure, does it really carry any sort of meaning, or, does it affect a fight these days? Because you quickly see if they're lying, especially at the weigh-in. And at that point, you'd probably, wonder, is the advantage lost? Watch the Wallam fight. This is the Kissim, and lots of WWE fans commenting below. Stroke of genius, as you said. Yeah, so I'll get into that as my next comment, or next topic that I was going to cover. I think that was a really good move for Tyson Fury to go to the WWE, get this promotion, and this really is, they had to look to do something. I don't know who set it up, whether it was Fury who was approached by the WWE, or whether it's Top Rank and ESPN sort of reaching out, or I'm not sure how it came about. But having that new audience, which won't necessarily follow boxing, be interested in boxing. A big guy like Tyson Fury, I mean, it's different to some fighters, who've been in those sorts of things before, that are quite a lot shorter, but Tyson Fury is really a hulking sort of dude at, 6'8" or whatever he actually really is. So that is, having that guy go in there and, he is good with the theatrical stuff. I think in terms of, the scripting of the stuff's never great, but you know what I mean. Millions of people exposed to a bit of drama, and we know it's all scripted, but it still was a bit of fun, and it opens the door for him to have a new audience, know who he is. And if they hear about this fight with Deontay Wilder, and some of these people might be aware of Wilder to some extent, or aware of Fury to some extent, might just be the tipping point to get them interested. Oh, that guy's fighting, I'll be quite keen to see that. So I think, if you have millions of people exposed to him that wouldn't necessarily watch his fights or watch him, and let's face it, the whole couple of fights in Vegas against Wallin and Schwartz have done pretty poor numbers in terms of ticket sales, so I wouldn't imagine some of the peripheral interest is going to be any better. I think it was a really good move for Fury to jump on the WWE, and it's kind of right in his wheelhouse. You could see some other boxers not really doing that sort of thing so well because they don't have the personality. But it sort of made me wonder, and someone else had raised this elsewhere, why has Deontay Wilder never done something like that? He loves all that sort of theatrical type stuff, and I could imagine he'd do quite well within that realm, such as Fury, because they've got the charisma and to sort of pull off those sorts of things. Anyway, we'll keep going down the comments here. Oh, yeah, so tell me what you think of this whole WWE thing. Did you think it was a good move from Tyson Fury? And before I get to the comments again, I'll go to my Patreon. I've got some questions that were left to be answered in this live stream. So we have Scott, who's asked, I've been thinking of the significance of Ruiz vs Joshua 2 and where it ranks in heavyweight fights of the 21st century. Where do you rank it in terms of significance of heavyweight fights of this century, in terms of what the outcome means to the winner and the loser, broadcast silos, British boxing, and the fight fans in general? Oh, that is a loaded question, but it's probably, if you're to put it up with the bigger fights in the past 10 years, let's say 10 years, I think going back 20 years, that's sort of the end of a couple of, that the overhang of that 90s era with the likes of Lewis and Tyson. So if we just do it in terms of the past 10 years, it probably is within the biggest 3 or 4, 5 fights. There's not too many bigger fights that have sort of happened in the past 10 years that'll be sort of this anticipated, but also from the first fight, because let's face it, that upset by Ruiz Jr. was one of the biggest ever, and has gone down as one of the sort of, top 2, 3, 4 upsets of all time in the heavyweight division. It's, clustered in with the other, notable ones, as we all know. So it really is a big fight, and for the winner, obviously that they could really, I'm just trying to think how I want to sort of say this, like, I think for Joshua, because he was already the champion before, unified, had the Klitschko fight, defenses, and he went to the United States to have this. It was short notice. He lost it in such controversial fashion. The rematch might actually make him bigger than he was before, which I think would be the goal anyway. But for Andy Ruiz Jr., it really is clipping his ticket, and it's going to guarantee him, 1, some big fights, but 2, he'll really become a solidified boxing star, because I think at the moment there's some people looking at this as Ruiz Jr. is just holding the belts for now. There was sort of lapse from Joshua on June 1st, and that Ruiz not necessarily didn't get lucky, but he had the better of Joshua on the night, but that doesn't mean he'll get the better of him again. But if he does, well, that is really, his star will just explode. And obviously one of the biggest rematches, not just of the year, but in recent years. There's a lot to like about this fight, but what happens next? Because if Ruiz Jr. can end up getting into some sort of undisputed fight with whoever, for example, that is going to be the first undisputed fight in close to 20 years, which is going to be pretty massive for the heavyweight division. And for Joshua, if he can get the belts back, then obviously he can move on. He continues on his way. His star power's probably got bigger, and it probably does give the British boxing scene just a bit of a boost. I think this, just from what I've seen, and I actually did a video on this on my Patreon, just regarding, because there was those pay-per-view figures that had come out, lower than we're expecting, the Lomachenko and Campbell one, the Dillian White and Rivas one, and there was all sorts of factors that I sort of outlined that were, contributing factors to that, but one of them was what I was calling the Joshua effect, which I think his loss did have a knock-on effect in terms of the casual interest in the sport. I think that there is a correlation between his loss and the lower figures. So I think if he wins, I think that really is a boost to British boxing in general, and obviously there will be people back on the hype train. But it's a massive fight for both guys. Next Patreon question that I'll get to from Toby, who asks, what did you make of the Golovkin-Derevyanchenko fight? Also name a few fighters of the past who you think could have beaten Mayweather. The Golovkin-Derevyanchenko fight, well, the first about 4 or 5 rounds, I've got to be honest, I was actually editing a video while I was watching that. I can't even remember what fight it was. It was one of the ones last weekend, so I was only paying sort of cursory attention. I was editing, but I had a screen very close by, and I was sort of looking up and down. So I saw the knockdown, and I saw, close back and forth action, but I really only dialed into the fight about halfway through. And it really was a bit of a war. I thought that was a really good fight. And I did think, and because I went back and actually watched a couple of different fights from, I think it was 2016 or 2017 of Golovkin, because I had thought, watching him, and I thought, he's looking 37 now. Even though there's been some really hardcore Golovkin fans saying, look, this was just a terrific opponent, I think we are seeing an aging Golovkin. He's slowing down, and especially later in the fight, there were a couple of moments I thought, is Derevyanchenko going to stop him here? Is this, but then Triple G would rally. But I did make me think, well, if he can hold on to that belt and he ends up fighting Canelo, Canelo's going to take that from him in a more decisive fashion than the first 2 fights. I had Golovkin winning the first fight. I thought Canelo edged the second one, but I would probably pick Canelo to stop Triple G in the third one. He looked vulnerable in there against Derevyanchenko. But, I don't want to take credit away from Derevyanchenko because he had a good game plan. He came to fight. He's a very tough and hard fighter, durable, and he really put it on Golovkin. But I did think that was sort of post-prime Golovkin. Just my thoughts on that. In terms of Mayweather, well, I think there was 1 or 2 fights within his career which were, obviously, there were a few sort of question marks about, and obviously rematches and shoot, etc. But fighters from the past, I think there's fighters that could have beaten Mayweather, but you got to say that he did fight a lot of decent names in his career. He had a little bit of luck with judges and other bits and pieces, and he's obviously sort of cashed out on the back of that. But I think it's a great story, and a lot of these divisions, you can sort of think of 2 or 3 that just carry the sport. Just seems to be decade after decade, like 147, the heavyweight division, which maybe it's not as strong as it once was, especially in sort of the 70s and 90s, etc. But I think we have been at a bit of a purple patch in the heavyweight division in recent years. It has been better, more competitive. We've got a lot of good fighters coming through. Sure, this year might have been in the toilet a little bit, but overall, it does look like the health of the heavyweight division in particular. I've sort of veered away from the Mayweather question, but I do think the health of the division is much better than it was, say, in the mid to late 2000s, and even in some of that Klitschko reign, it was a little bit weak and the interest wasn't necessarily there. You can't say we don't have characters who don't keep it interesting, and you can think of half a dozen guys right off the sort of top of your head that have made it more interesting, outside of the guys who are humble and do the business in the ring. There are some characters, even though they might talk a lot of BS, they do good for the sport. So I'll just get back to the chat because I'm probably about 30 or 40 minutes behind here. We're already up to 48 minutes, so I'll try to go for another, if I can manage to catch up on the chat, that is, and get through these other questions. We'll maybe wrap it up at about an hour 15-ish. I don't know. We'll just have to see. I say these things and it ends up blowing out by 15, 20 minutes, half an hour. So Adam Fahey says Tyson is 6'8" at most. John Otter says the same, and maybe about 6'7.5". Yeah, I think so. David Hay on BoxRec is 6'3". Well, you might recall, I'm not sure if you guys caught at some point, he had that surgery to his back, and he revealed it. I think maybe it was after the first Bellew fight, or I don't know. I can't remember when it was, but he did an interview and he said he actually gained 5 centimeters of height, which is the best part of just over 2 inches. Which I kind of thought, well, that's, maybe he had been as low as 6'1", maybe he did finish at 6'3", but yeah, Bellew was 6'3", and I thought Hay was a bit shorter. So Rob says everyone looks small next to Klitschko. Even if he is 6'1", he did so well. Usyk's gonna be tall. That's okay. I've missed the thread of that. Spong charged by Florida police this morning for allowing his pet cougar to escape. Didn't that happen a few months ago? I mean, there was one of his pets escaped a while ago. Or is this a new incident? And apologies if I'm way behind on the chat here, but it just sort of it piles up quickly here. Right Hook Boxing. He's talking to Delboy there. Magic Johnson is 6'9", and he is in a picture next to Tyson Fury, and Fury is about 1.5 inches shorter. Yeah, I actually saw that picture. I've seen Fury against a number of tall guys too, and sometimes from sparring pics. He's next to the likes of when he was at Big Bear, next to Joe Joyce, who's 6'6". He only looked a little bit taller, and there were a couple of photos where you could actually see from the mirror, which was in the background, he was lifting off by an inch. Okay, people are, I'm probably about 10 minutes behind it, but people are debating David Hay's height, Joseph Parker's height. Bellew was beating Usyk before the KO. I didn't really see it like that. Bellew just emptied his tank. Bellew had some success in that fight. I don't necessarily think he was winning all the rounds. He had some success. But ultimately, Usyk stopped in, what was it, in the 7th round? The guy, it doesn't really matter if Bellew was beating him, he didn't get the win. And I think Bellew knew he had to fight a certain way, but he couldn't keep it up. And that's, Usyk's pressure and just the angles, the punches coming in, it just wore Bellew down. And this is what he's going to do in the heavyweight division to some of these guys that are, there or thereabouts in terms of a similar height. Bradis did well against Usyk on the inside. Will be interesting what bigger, stronger guys can do. Bradis isn't the quickest out there. Yeah, I'm not saying that he's unbeatable. I think there is going to be some good matchups for him in terms of he'll have the style advantage, but there's some of these guys with the heavier hands, some guys with quick feet or quick hands, if they can get to the inside, if they can give Usyk a couple of things that he wasn't expecting, he can be beaten. And we've seen he can be hit before. Okay, I started off a real firestorm with these heights here, questioning people's heights. I've got quite a few people comments here. I'll just sort of skip past some of these here. I think Rigo is taller than Tyson was. What, Rigondeaux? Okay, it looks like we've caught up on the chat here. I went past about 15 comments talking about height. I'll just go back to a couple that I did miss over. So Marcus says, hello from Norway. Did any of the amateur heavyweights in the World Championships impress? Well, are we talking just exclusively about the ones that were amateur, or the sometime pros like Bakadir Jalilov? He obviously did a good job there. I mean, there seemed to be Justice Hooney out of Australia. Everyone seemed to be impressed with him. I saw a couple of highlights of his fights. They were sort of run on different news sites over here. He looked pretty decent. It's probably, I don't necessarily have the time to sort of watch a lot of those tournaments. I mean, I'll end up watching the Olympics a lot closer just to sort of see that cream of the crop that's coming through. But there is a decent pipeline coming through. I think we're even seeing, just from the 2016 Olympics, those guys now are really starting to step up. They've had their first couple of years of pros, and, you think the likes of F.A. Jakba, Tony Yoka, Filip Hrgovic, Joe Joyce, there's a whole bundle of guys who are in that class of 2016. Ivan Daichko, even though he's been a bit slow to impress in the pro ranks, but there's a whole bunch of guys that they're only a year or so away from really competing at the highest level. Some of them are in fights that, arguably, if someone with a record of 15-0 would be fighting, but some of these guys are fighting them when they're like 7-0, 9-0, that sort of thing. So the likes of Yoka and Hrgovic and Joyce, they're going to be in big fights very, very soon. Okay, so UK Rob says, damn, I missed the start. Yeah, we're about 54 minutes into it, Rob. Keep up. And if you haven't subscribed to Mixed Combat Radio, do so. Very good channel. Really enjoy their live streams as well. They have good back and forth banter with him and Matt. Very good stuff. So Jaho says, don't you think Wilder is going to be running out of opponents after Fury, Ruiz, Kovnatsky, considering he's avoiding fighting White, Joshua and the other non-PBC fighters? Not necessarily. There's always the treadmill, because if you think about it, he gets through Fury, for example. Let's just say he does. I'm not saying he will. But if he does, then he's going to have a mandatory challenge with Dillian White as the next guy. He'll probably have to fight Wilder next, or there could be a unification, and then they'll have Kovnatsky waiting in the wings as well. And the sort of conveyor belt of guys coming through, by the time you start mixing out, say, 3 or 4 more fights, all of a sudden F.A. Ajagba's, 17, 18-0. He's then 27 years old. He's got the seasoning he needs, and he's ready for his title shot. So it is one of those cases that they're going to find someone. And at this point, for Wilder, they have to. He had the sort of middling years, the guys fighting the likes of Aduapa, Molina, Areola, yada, yada, yada. He is trying to cement legacy now, so he needs the bigger guys in the heavyweight division. He needs to put top 10s on his resume, just because if he wants to be remembered as a truly great heavyweight, he's got to beat some of the best of his generation. He's got to start working his way through all the top names. But that doesn't go for him. It's all of them. If they really want to go down in history, they've got to start stringing it together. And when you're starting to get towards the tail end of your prime, you've got to start getting those fights in there quickly. Big Rob says we need Dubois versus Jagber for a world final title eliminated by the end of 2020. Well, if that fight happens, I would say that would be a fight that happens in 2022. If I was to just put the crystal ball out there, that's probably when they're sort of really at the top of their game. They've completed their sort of prospect phase. They are contending for titles. If that fight came off, one of them has already got a belt. So be interesting to see. This is Robert Blythen saying Ruiz versus Fury. In the past, Fury has struggled with smaller fighters. Well, and from some of the sparring stories, the apparent sparring stories that have come out, body work too is something that Fury has not necessarily appreciated. We did see a little bit of that from Weiland as well, having success to the body, and it makes sense because Fury, with his very tricky feints and upper body movement, go for the biggest target that's going to be moving the least, which is the body. And I think we saw that catch up with some of that body work against Weiland, catch up with Fury in that fight. And he was slowing down towards the end. And I think someone with a bigger puncher, if they can't, obviously go to the head, like Wilder was trying to knock Fury's head off, didn't have a lot of success. But if someone like a good body puncher, and Ruiz Jr. is a good body puncher, we saw that against Anthony Joshua. If he goes to Fury's body with success, because he has to get into the inside and land, that's obviously the challenge in itself against a guy that's got 9 or 10 inches in reach on you. But if he had success, it'd be interesting. That'd be a good fight. So UK Rob says, what do you think of Eubank Jr. versus Korobov? That's actually a really sneaky good fight. I actually really like that in terms of, if you saw the Charlo fight, Korobov, a lot of success. I think I might even put him favourite. I'm just, Eubank Jr. is an athlete, and we saw he could beat a rinsed James DeGale, and obviously, what's that other guy that was in the World Boxing Super Series who seems to have popped up for another title shot? Not Avni Yildirim, the Turkish guy. Yeah, but he was able to starch that guy in 1 or 2 rounds. But I think Korobov, that's a sneaky good fight. I kind of like that if they actually made that. Good morning from Watford in the UK, says Lee Scorpius. Hello to you, Lee. Adam Fahey says, I do think some people forget Wilder is 34 in 2 weeks with bad bones. He ain't got time to F around, says Adam Fahey. Yeah, I mean, I actually did do a Patreon video. Patrons will recall this just from a few weeks back, that Deontay Wilder, he had sort of expressed the desire to fight to 40 years old, and his wife Tilly Swift had been talking to, I can't remember who it was to, and I just don't see it. I think if Deontay Wilder's around at 40 years old, which is 5.5 years time ish, 5 years, whatever, 6 years, I think he's got a number of losses on his record. I think his durability, with some of the reasons that Adam just listed, especially with the brittle sort of right hand, right arm, 7 surgeries in recent years, I think he's got 2 years left at the top. He needs to be putting these big fights on his resume now, and I think he knows that time is to some extent running out, because his physical prime, he's not going to be anywhere near as good at, say, 37, 38 years old than he is right now, because he's not a guy like some of these others within the heavyweight division that can fall back onto his skill base. If he loses a step, he becomes much more hittable and he becomes much more beatable. Predictions for Alvarez versus Kovalev. I think Alvarez wins that. I think the body shots, and I think there's part of the reason that it got made that Kovalev, he's a good champion, but we've seen him beat him before by lesser punches, I think, than Canelo Alvarez, and to the body. And we saw against Anthony Yarde, the one real time that Yarde went to the body, Kovalev looked like he was almost out of there, and I think Alvarez one of the best body punchers in the game. I could see Kovalev having some success early on, bigger, taller guy, landing a few right hands. Maybe he could buzz Canelo Alvarez, but I think the body shots, it's probably going to be the decider in that one. Chisora had his ears boxed off by Fury, and he is similar in stature to Ruiz. Not sure who that's in response to. So Lee says, I think it's weird. Fury in shape more than ever, performed not as great. Dave Allen against Price in shape, performed bad. Maybe staying natural is the best thing. Be interested to see AJ versus Ruiz. Yeah, but sometimes it's not just about being in shape, it's the performance. Sometimes you don't perform as well, as you can. Sometimes your opponent, the style matchup is not good. You can't do everything that you usually would want to do or could do. And I think we saw that against Dave Allen and David Price, for example. He was trying to line up some of those, pre-planned shots like he was for Lucas Brown, but he just wasn't able to land them. Price denied him the opportunities. Whereas, Lucas Brown, he was able to, relatively box Dave Allen comfortably until he took one big body shot. But I think a lot of us sort of thought that Lucas Brown was shot at that point, and even though he's only got 2 losses on his record, he's saying that he's there for the long haul, much more to come. But I think Lucas Brown is done like a dog's dinner. I mean, I know some people in their lists sort of have him in their top 25 and that sort of thing, but I think he slipped well out of that now. Yildirim, you're right, just popped through. Who was the guy? It was Yildirim. So who was the guy? I'm confusing it with that other guy, the one who was going to have the title shot but then got done on racketeering charges. If anyone can remember that guy, that was only recently too. So liberalism is a cult, says, I believe FA is overrated. Well, we're going to see in the next year or two as he steps up and has some of those tests. I know some people weren't happy with that performance against Ali Aaron Demirezhian, but for me, I saw a lot of positive in that because he needed rounds. Let's face it, there's a number of guys in the division. This is sort of getting to my next topic now. Specifically, I wanted to mention F.A. Jagba. He's facing an opponent on October the 26th. Was it Jack Mulawayi? I haven't got it written in front of me. And then you have Samuel Peter versus Aslanbek Makhmadov, which I was like, man, they keep digging up Samuel Peter for some of these fights. It really is, they need to sort of put that to bed, I think. Samuel Peter, he didn't look good in that Fury fight, and Makhmadov's got much heavier hands. And they got Lyakovic for Simon Keane. He's like 43 years old, which I do believe would be a real age. Whereas Samuel Peter is listed at 39, but I mean, what is he? More like mid-40s-ish? But yeah, these guys like Makhmadov and F.A. Jagba, they need rounds. They need some of these really durable journeymen. Or in the case of, it was an unbeaten prospect in Ali Demirishin. I was always a little surprised about how that fight even got made, because it's not like Demirishin was just some sort of, journeyman wandering the division. He was an Olympian from the class of 2016 as well. So, and he had a WBO strap. I think it was the European strap he held briefly for the WBO. So that always was curious to me how that got made. And I know he said he thought that he could win that fight. And actually he put up a very good effort. But, the bigger man just outworked Ali Demirishin, just had a bit more success. The jab was decent from a Jagba on that night. And he threw a lot of punches. It was, close to 900 punches or something ridiculous. He showed a good engine in that one. And I think, F.A. Jagba in the next year or so really is going to... if he can be matched well with some of these tougher tests, I think he can go a long way in the division. I mean, I think he's going to be a top 10 guy for the next, number of years if he can, get the right fights in the next year or so. And I do like the way that, in general, he's been matched this year. Makhmadov, I'm a little bit more concerned. He doesn't seem to have the promotional backing to get him some of the fights that he needs. I mean, Samuel Peter, is this really the guy he should be fighting? Yeah, I'm not so sure, but he might be able to get some rounds. But actually, I mean, I wouldn't mind if they actually tried to dig up Ali Demirishin for Aslanbek Makhmadov, because he proved very durable and gave a good account of himself against F.A. Jagba. And if he's willing to take on that sort of level of risk, if they could land that fight against Demirishin for Makhmadov, it'd be, I'd certainly like to see that fight. What do you make of the WBC Twitter posting listing Wilder White a one to choose from for May? We'll have to see what happens. I mean, is it really even feasible? If Deontay Wilder fights February the 20th, 22nd, 2020, and then May, it's a pretty tight turnaround. I mean, as it is, they're talking about if Wilder fights November 23rd against Ortiz, a 3-month turnaround. I mean, that's the smallest turnaround Wilder has done for years. And then is he going to only have 2 months and then fight Dillian Whyte, his mandatory? I can't see it. I think that's, the Wilder and Whyte fight most likely is going to get pushed back because the Fury fight would be in the way. But I guess if for whatever reason that doesn't go ahead, well, maybe the May fight could happen. But yeah, it is a bit curious. Getting through the chat here. Don't forget to hit that like button, says Scott70. Yes, please, if you can. So Boxing Spectrum. So thank you for that super chat donation. He says, do you think Ruiz wins Fighter of the Year, or does Pacquiao trump that of or anybody else? If Andy Ruiz Jr. wins the rematch, hands down, he probably wins it. Even now you could make a good case. Certainly I think he's already got upset of the year sewn up. Maybe even round of the year. You could make a case for round 3. Yeah, so Andy Ruiz Jr. is... it's a lock if he beats Anthony Joshua indecisively in December. Kurtsidis, that was who I was thinking of. So Avni Yildirim was the guy who fought Eubank. Yeah, I get him confused with Kurtsidis. He was up on racketeering charges. He was due to have some sort of title fight or eliminator or some big fight, and then he had to be pulled of that because he got charged with, 12 charges of something being was it a mob hitman or enforcer, not hitman. So True 2022 says, hello from wet and windy Wales. Hello to you too. Fat Apples, you're a Usyk believer, but early bud. I like where Alexander Usyk is going and what he can do. How much we can take from tomorrow's or the performance against Witherspoon in a couple of days remains to be seen. I mean, it's the whole sort of, you're reading the tea leaves and doing what we normally do, but I do think that he is going to have a good career at heavyweight. And the next sort of 3 years, that's key for him. So Samuel Peter was born in 1939, says Adam Fahey. That must have been the year that Luis Ortiz was sparring some of the those Depression-era fighters, right? Timothy Thomas says, morning BS, only just heard about Spence early hours. Lord, I pray he recovers. Yeah, I think we do. I think we all do. Yeah, that's a really terrible accident that happened, and I think all our prayers go out to him, and we hope he is going to get better soon, and that his boxing career, let alone, hopefully, put that aside to a second, hopefully his health is okay and he doesn't have any long-lasting permanent damage. And if he is back in the ring, hopefully he does have, can get back to where he was and that there's no lasting effects. But even if there is, and he has to, maybe step back from boxing, I hope he recovers as much as he can. Sultan Ibragimov says FA is overrated, he'll soon disappoint. Well, that's the beauty about the heavyweight division. At this point in their career, it's sort of put up and shut up. Most of them have had their first 10 fights, the highly rated prospects. I think we've already seen one or two that have sort of slipped off the map. I mean, there was all the sort of buzzing sort of around Nathan Gorban, and that sort of fell away pretty quickly after that loss to Daniel Dubois. So the next 5 or 10 fights for all of these guys, Hrgović, Yoka, Dubois, Ajagba, it's really going to tell us a lot, and we'll soon see where the chips fall. So Matthias says Hrgović stops Wilder. I guess it depends when they fight, because if it's Hrgović in 2 or 3 years' time and Deontay Wilder's like 37, he probably would. Coach Qatar says, what's the latex on Errol Spence situation? I haven't caught up with the latest on that, but the statement that PBC put out, and I can actually, let me bring it up. I'll just bring it up. Yeah, so they actually put out a press release on it. So bear in mind that this was about 12 hours ago. So it says Errol Spence Jr., IBF WBC Unified Welterweight World Champion, was involved in a serious single car accident in Dallas early Thursday morning and is being treated at a Dallas area hospital. Spence is awake and responding, and his condition is listed as stable. He did not sustain any broken bones or fractures, but has some facial lacerations. He is expected to make a full recovery. He is currently resting with his family by his side. They want to thank everyone for their prayers and well wishes, and are extremely grateful to the Dallas first responders who rushed to the scene to attend to Errol after the accident, and to the doctors who were taking care of him in hospital. That is the statement issued by PBC. I'll just cough here for a sec, just to So Timothy says Ruiz gets Fighter of the Year. He turned things upside down. That he did. Not many people saw that one coming. Fighter of the Year, Jamel Charlo. Jamel or Jamal? Because didn't Jamel lose his belt? Isn't that what happened? Doesn't Tony Harrison have that now? This whole thing, Tyrone Spong failing a test, and this whole claims of conspiracy. Yeah, I'm not buying that. There's a failed test. Spong has to explain it, prove his innocence. I mean, trying to deflect onto anyone else with this is a setup, I'm not buying it at all. Boxing Spectrum says, is Pacquiao probably a candidate also for Fighter of the Year? Yeah, possibly. I mean, I think if you were to have 5 or 6 top fighters that people were doing a poll on, given some of his performances this year, he's looked pretty good. I mean, against Thurman, looked better than I expected. Timothy says Usyk is stepping forward much quicker than I thought he would. Attempts to fight better opponents than Tyson Fury, perhaps. Well, he'll be stepping into a title fight next, Alexander Usyk. So let's hope that Chaz Witherspoon can prepare him for that. Chaz will need more than a spoon. He certainly will. So Old Gonzo says Inouye is underrated. Yeah, well, that's only 4 weeks away, that final of the World Boxing Super Series. I have round 10 between Triple G and Derevyanchenko as round of the year. I think there will end up being a number of rounds of the year that we'll be looking back on going, you know, what was the best round this year? And I think even though we haven't necessarily always seen the best fights made often enough, in 2019 it's been a bit of a year of hurry up and wait. Sometimes some of the fights that we haven't necessarily been in love with have actually delivered. I think that Derevyanchenko and Triple G fight was a bit under the radar heading into that weekend, which is unusual for a Triple G fight, but maybe that's because it was on DAZN. But then you think the Spence Porter fight, there were some good rounds in that one too. So Warren says, at Boxing Squared, with all the championship fights happening, who do you think is going to be the king of the heavyweights with all the belts, or number one? Well, it's a brave man to predict the heavyweight division more than about 2 months out, because it just, you know, changes like the wind. You know, all these guys have, I mean, the talk of unification undisputed, it feels like we've been treading that same old water for about 2 years now, at least 18 months. So I'm very reticent to sort of say one guy is going to be doing this and that, because are these fights ever going to get made? And that's the problem. Lots of marination, and then sometimes the meat goes rotten. You get an upset. Andy Ruiz Jr. upsets Anthony Joshua, and I'm sure at that point Deontay Wilder would have been screaming, because obviously he'd put off the rest of 2019 and the early 2020 for rematches, building towards a Joshua fight, which now looks like it won't happen. But I don't know, it's just hard to predict where these things will go. I can't pronounce your name, sorry, I'll just have to say Errol is lucky it was only him who got hurt. Which, imagine if he was wearing a seatbelt, he might have had even less injury. I don't know. UK Rob says, was a gift in Spong. Yeah, I mean, I think Usyk would have won that comfortably enough. I think he was going to outpoint Tyrone Spong. This whole narrative of he's now Usyk's now ducking Spong, I mean, I'm not buying it for a second. I mean, they chose Spong. Literally handpicked the guy as the opponent for Usyk's first fight at heavyweight. They picked him for a reason, because they thought, yeah, we can beat this guy. So Fat Apple says Wilder's power is so overrated. Kovnatsky and Chisora knocked Spilker out quicker. Likewise, Povetkin stopped Duhaupas quicker, as did AJ stop Molina, and Gavin quicker, as did Joyce knock out Stavern. Triangle theories don't always work. That's the thing. I mean, some of these guys, I mean, you can sort of say Wilder's knocked out one or two guys quicker than other guys who've been knocked out. You can reverse the argument. I mean, I think we do know that if Deontay Wilder hits you and he hits you clean, it's going to hurt and you might not get up. And even if you do get up, you might not win the fight, as Tyson Fury found out. So Yoss says Usyk will be tested on his next fight. Witherspoon will be an easy task for him. Yep, I agree with that. Actually, I'll just get back to my Patreon and answer these couple of final questions that were there. So this is an interesting one, and I want people to sort of weigh in on this, because I know that Dillian White has certainly given a bit of a sort of... He's not very happy with hardcore boxing fans at the moment for a number of reasons. Maybe because they're trying to ask questions about what's going on, but he's given a bit of a spray to hardcore boxing fans over Logan Paul and KSI, the rematch, which is being promoted by Matchroom. So Unger has asked, should boxing fans be more positive about Logan Paul versus KSI 2? And, you know, to me, I don't actually mind that fight at all. I mean, I'm not saying I'm going to buy it, and I'm not going to go out of my way to watch it live, but a big event like that, and this sort of goes back to that point I was making earlier about Tyson Fury being on WWE and the promotion that he got from that. The amount of non-boxing fans, or what you could class as, really ultra casual fans that are coming in to view this rematch, that on the back of the celebrity of Logan Paul and KSI, they follow these guys. This is actually not a bad thing for boxing. I think often a lot of boxing fans turn up their nose at this sort of stuff, but the reality is a lot of boxing fans got to start somewhere, and if this can be something that can capture some fans, I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I mean, everyone starts off in the sport as a casual fan, and slowly you become more sort of dedicated to the sport, and you can probably chart your own history in the sport at different times. You might have sort of dipped in and dipped out of the sport or whatever, but often you see a couple of fights and piques your interest. You want to know more. You start reading the websites, you start watching YouTube videos, you start coming to live streams like this one, or different bits and pieces that pull you in to become more of a established, and should we say hardcore boxing fan. And fans got to start somewhere. So if that directs more traffic on boxing, and this is going to be treated as a professional fight, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I mean, I don't think a lot of boxing fans who are established boxing fans, quite a few won't be too interested, but they won't buy the pay-per-view. But you don't have to. But this could actually breathe a little bit of life into the sport. It gets eyes on boxing. You think about the coverage that this fight will get, not just from the pay-per-view, but the sort of ripple effect of the videos that different YouTubers will be doing to their massive audiences about boxing, this fight, and the build up, and the flow on effect, the news coverage that this is probably likely to get as well. It's going to be all sorts of stories and headlines about this fight, so I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing at all. I mean, boxing often is in the press for all the wrong reasons, so if these two want to make millions of dollars and they're bringing some eyeballs to boxing, I'm okay with it. And the next question, which is from True 2022, he asked, you get a call from Eddie Hearn. He wants you to fight another boxing YouTuber for $5 million. Hopefully that's not $5. $5 million, I'll take that. So he says, obviously you accept. What would your choice of walkout music be? That's a really tough question. And I actually was trying to think about that today, and I'm not necessarily someone who has one favorite song. I might, really, like about 10 different songs at once. And True's favorite song is which he would walk out to, I should say. Not favorite song, but his walkout song would be Tenor Soar, Ring the Alarm. So tell me, everyone who's in the chat, what would your walkout song be? Because I've been racking my brain, and some of the ones that I came up with, they've already been used or are being used by established boxers. So I didn't want to sort of say them because I didn't want to just sort of copy them. And you can probably think of a few high-profile songs that would really be epic to walk out to. But this is one I'd need to think about more. But what would your walkout song be? And what sort of theatrics would you do? I mean, if you did see the... and this is sort of jumping onto another sport here, but UFC 243 with Israel Adesanya, when he came out, did his ring walk, and he did those dance moves with 3 other guys. Now that really sort of lifted the level. I mean, I could see, and I think we have seen variations of before, I mean, the Tyson Fury one, with that sort of 5-minute ring walk with the mariachi band, and it was on a float and that, but some of that was just over the top, and it was a bit cheesy. But I could see more and more of that happening. But what would your ring walkout song be? Interested to know. Okay, I'll just get back to the chat here. Sorry, I had to have a drink of water. Geez, we've been going for 1 hour, 23 and 44 seconds. We'll try to wrap it up in the next 5 minutes or so. So Skater says, just got here. I've missed the part where nobody is fighting each other yet. well, that is a trait this year in the heavyweight division. We have talked about a few different fights that are coming up. The Usyk and Witherspoon being the one, do I want to say notable fight this weekend? There's a couple of other prospects in action over the next couple of days, but nothing that's a really big fight. We talked about a couple of other prospects that are up in action the next couple of months. FA Jagba later this month, and also Aslan Bekmambetov at the back end of the year. So just try to catch up on the chat here. So Warren says, Boxing Squared have a loss coming either way against each other or someone else. I think they're both shown their defence and their best. Okay, I must have missed what that was back. So the comments have gone quite quick here. So Boxing Squared, this is from Fat Apples. When you rank a division, do you prefer resume, belts, common sense, or all three? How do you break down the heavyweight top 5, for example? Well, yeah, it's kind of a bit of all three. You know, resume comes into it. If you do have a belt, that sort of comes into it's a weighting. It definitely is all three, including common sense. But that's the beauty of these sorts of things. You might agree with me, but then the next guy won't, and he'll have his different reasons and opinions and weightings. But I think the sort of top 5 or the top 4 at the moment seems to write itself. I mean, you've got 4 names, maybe not in the same order, where you've got Wilder, Fury, Ruiz and Joshua. Any sort of order of those 4 seems to be generally a consensus top 4 at the moment. So BG London says, who's happy about David Price stepping in for Peter Parker? We did talk about that earlier in the stream. Not a bad fight, maybe not the best opponent, but probably one of the better names in terms of profile that they could have parachuted in such late notice. So Skater says he would walk out to Hatebreed looking down the barrel. Kaz Ghost says, I would use Adele. I set fire to the rain. Warren Williams, J-Rock win. Unger says, Iron Maiden, hallowed be thy name. Bogdan Dinu, crazy bald heads. Fat Apples, you Barbie girl. Fat Apple says, simply the best, or simply the best, is Mike Tyson walking out to that one. Boxing Spectrum says, I like the song No Easy Way Out, Rocky soundtrack. Don't forget the Beetroots, 10 hours of rolling thunder and rain, wearing the same raincoat as David Dunn from Unbreakable. Subtle but badass. Where are we? How good is Ipswich McKean? Do you mean Dempsey McKean? Heard he is Australia's heavyweight champion. Yeah, he's an okay prospect. I saw him, was it recent? Was it on the Jeff Horn card? He looked okay. John Otter says 3-6 Mafia, it's a fight. Lubuck 77, too late on here, but great channel, Mr. Squared. Thank you very much. Dempsey McKean from Ipswich. Says Unger. So PJD songwriter, there is free boxing tonight on YouTube MTK promotion. So Scott 70, my walkout tune, Ace of Spades by Motorhead. Warren says, Boxing Squared, thank you for answering thank you for answering. Glad to see your subs growing. I got my pick at either Ruiz, Usyk, or White if he's cleared to fight. I don't think Joshua's going to turn it around, and I think Wilder, Fury. I think the comment cut off there. Fat Apple says, lol, Scott, really? I missed that conversation. So Liam Roskell says, McKean looks alright so far. It's hard to tell. Need to see him against someone of note. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those ones, you can look a monster against some of these guys, but you probably need to bring in some better journeymen for us to actually get a bit of a gauge, because some of the opponents are a little soft. I mean, but that's for a lot of prospects, ones especially that aren't being brought along too quickly. They're going to have, sometimes 15 or more fights, and a lot of them are not going to be good fights. Timothy says, Cass, how is the Spider-Man? Bogdan Dinu's walkout song is Cheeky Girls That Touch My Bum. Okay. Oh, okay, so Chris Eubank always walked out to Simply the Best. Simply the Best. True 2022, Tennisaw, Ring the Alarm. Yeah, I was just saying that, so that's a good song. Timothy Thomas to the Thunderbirds tune. Right. BG London, Glenn Hoddle, Diamond Lights. Terry Wogan, The Floral Dance. Okay, this is getting out of hand here. Lou Buck 77 says, who do you see breaking through in 2020? Well, I think in the next year to 18 months, it really is the class of 2016. I truly believe those guys that are coming through are actually the next wave. And we're about to enter a transition period. And I'm planning to do a video. I'll probably leave this for around my Christmas time coverage, sort of looking to the year ahead. But I do believe that we're about to enter a transition phase. And it's not to say that some of the names of note won't still be around and won't be contending. But there's going to be a whole bunch of guys that are coming through, and there will be renewal. The heavyweight division is going through a process of renewal at the moment, where some of the old guys, in the next year or so, you're going to see the end of Alexander Povetkin, Luis Ortiz. They're going to be turned over, and some of these other guys, as Fat Apple says, Hergovich, Joyce, Yoka, etc. Some of those sites, guys, Makhmadov, Dubois, Ajagba, they're all coming through. So Coach Qatar says Wilder vs Ortiz is not pay-per-view worthy. Well, I think it's going to struggle to get anywhere near the Fury and Wilder numbers. I think those estimates of 200,000, which have been floating around in the media by a number of commentators, that might be about the level. Maybe it'll be less, I don't know. Maybe it'll be a bit more, but I think for the money that's involved, what the guys fighting will expect, I hope they have a lot of money guaranteed up front, especially Luis Ortiz. You'd hope he's got his $7 million guaranteed up front. Anyways, we're an hour and a half into the stream here. I'll wrap it up. I'm starting to get a little bit hoarse, but 11 o'clock New Zealand time. I'll wrap it up here, but thank you one and all for joining the chat, for being part of the live stream. We will be back here next Friday, same time, New Zealand Standard Time, 9:30 p.m. So wherever you are in the world, take care, wear your seatbelt, drive safe, have a good weekend. Catch you later.